The wine hit the paper before anyone said a word. Samantha stood at the edge of the table, her glass tilted just enough to look accidental, though it wasn't. The red spread fast, bleeding through the soft blues and greens my son had worked so carefully to layer. The watercolor warped, the paper curling as if it were trying to pull away from what was happening to it. Caleb didn't move. His hands hovered in the air, unsure whether to touch the ruin or pretend it wasn't there. Right after that moment before the laughter, before the excuses, I need to say this clearly. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team of the channel Family Afterlight, inspired by real-life situations to convey lessons about family, emotion, and human values. All characters and events are illustrative. Samantha set her glass down directly on top of the painting. "It's just paper," she said, already smiling. "He needs to learn that not everything he makes is special." Uncle Howard laughed from the couch. "That's life," he added. "Toughen up early." My mother, Diane, inhaled sharply, then forced a light chuckle. "Oh, Samantha, you're so clumsy," she said, grabbing napkins and wiping the table instead of looking at her grandson. "Ava, don't make that face. It's nothing. Nothing." That was the word she always used. Caleb's shoulders tightened. He didn't cry. He didn't look at me. He stared at the stain like he could erase it if he stayed quiet enough. "He worked on that for days," I said, my voice careful, measured. I was already choosing my tone, already calculating how not to ruin dinner. Samantha rolled her eyes. "And now he learned something useful. You baby him too much." Howard snorted again. "Kids bounce back. He'll survive." Diane wiped harder. "We can buy him a nicer one," she said quickly. "A real set. Let's just sit down and eat. Please." Caleb slid his hands into his lap. He made himself smaller in the chair. The way I used to when I was his age. The way you do when you learn that attention is dangerous. If you're listening right now, maybe while driving or folding laundry or trying to get through your own long evening, take a breath and stay with me. Moments like this don't announce themselves as important until it's already too late. Samantha lifted her glass again. "See?" she said, nodding toward Caleb. "He's fine." I watched my son swallow his hurt, watched the room reward Samantha with laughter and relief. I felt the old pressure rise in my chest, the instinct to smooth things over, to apologize for existing too loudly. But something shifted, quietly, permanently. The painting lay there between us, soaked and ruined, and no one reached for the child who made it. Caleb didn't cry. That was the part no one noticed. Or maybe they noticed and chose not to see it. He stayed perfectly still, his back straight, his chin tucked in, like movement itself might invite more attention. His eyes didn't fill. They went flat, focused. He stared at the ruined paper as if he were studying damage instead of feeling it. "See," Samantha said, lifting her shoulders. "He's tougher than you think." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. My body remembered this moment before my mind did. The heat in my face, the pressure behind my eyes, the instinct to make myself small so the room could stay comfortable. Diane finally looked at Caleb. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "the way you talk to someone you don't intend to help. Why don't you go wash your hands before dinner?" Caleb nodded immediately. He pushed his chair back without scraping it, slid down, and walked toward the sink with his head lowered. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. Howard leaned forward. "Kids today are too sensitive," he said. "When we were young, no one made a big deal out of feelings." Samantha laughed. "Exactly. I'm doing him a favor." A favor. I had heard that word my entire childhood. I followed Caleb with my eyes. He scrubbed his hands too hard, like he was trying to wash something else off. When a drop of water splashed onto the floor, he froze, completely. His shoulders locked, and he waited. Waited for what? Careful. Diane called quickly. "Don't make a mess." "I'm sorry," Caleb whispered. The words came out automatically, smooth from practice. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not all at once. Quiet fractures. The kind you don't feel until weight is placed on them. I saw myself at his age, standing in kitchens just like this one, learning when to disappear, learning that silence was safer than truth, learning that adults felt better when children didn't react. Frank cleared his throat at the head of the table. He didn't say anything. He rarely did. His gaze stayed fixed on his plate, his hands folded neatly, like he was holding himself in place. Caleb returned to his chair and sat without being asked. He kept his hands in his lap. He didn't look at the painting again. Samantha raised her glass. "To family," she said lightly. No one clinked, but no one objected either. I felt the old reflex rise in me, the urge to smooth this over, to save the evening, to protect everyone else from discomfort. Then I looked at my son, quiet, obedient, already learning the rules. And I understood what was being passed down. Not love, not resilience. Silence. I waited for someone else to speak. That was my first mistake. I looked down the table, searching for a sign that I wasn't alone in what I had just seen. Uncle Howard avoided my eyes. Samantha leaned back in her chair, satisfied, swirling what was left of her wine. My mother kept her focus on the napkins in her hands, folding and refolding them like they were instructions she needed to get right. I glanced at my father. Frank sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid, his face unreadable. He didn't look at Caleb. He didn't look at Samantha. He stared straight ahead, as if silence were a task he had committed to finishing. "Mom," I said quietly. My voice surprised me. It sounded smaller than I felt. She did that on purpose. Diane didn't look up. "Ava, please," she said. "Not now. Not now when I asked. When he's older. When it hurts more." She finally met my eyes, and her smile tightened. "This is a family weekend. Do you really want to turn it into something ugly?" Samantha laughed softly. "There it is," she said. "You always do this. You take something small and make it dramatic." I felt my throat close. It wasn't small to him. Howard waved a hand. "You're projecting. Kids forget things like this in 5 minutes." Caleb sat frozen beside me, staring at his hands. His foot tapped once against the chair leg, then stopped, like he'd corrected himself. Diane leaned closer to me, her voice dropping into that familiar warning tone. "Lower your voice," she said. "Everyone's here. We don't need a scene." The word scene landed hard. It always had. It meant stop. It meant swallow it. It meant your feelings are more inconvenient than the behavior that caused them. I looked around at the table again. No one stepped in. No one said. That was wrong. No one said. "He's just a child." Frank shifted in his chair, just slightly. For a moment, I thought he might speak. Instead, he reached for his water and took a slow sip. Samantha smiled at me, triumphant. "See," she said, "even Dad knows when to let things go." I felt something inside me split, clean and sharp. I realized then that waiting was a choice. Silence was a choice, and every person at this table had already made theirs. Diane placed a hand on my arm. "Ava," she said softly, "the way you speak to someone you're trying to calm down. Sit, eat, let it go." I looked at her hand, then at my son. Caleb's shoulders were drawn inward, his body angled away from the table, like he was already planning his exit. I didn't sit. I didn't raise my voice. But I stopped trying to belong in a room that required my child to disappear. I pushed my chair back and stood. The sound cut through the room sharper than any raised voice. Caleb flinched, then looked up at me, his eyes wide with confusion and something close to fear. I stepped forward and positioned myself between him and Samantha, close enough that she had to lean back slightly to keep her space. "You enjoyed that," I said. My voice was steady. Too steady for how fast my heart was beating. Samantha blinked. "Enjoyed what you enjoyed watching a 6-year-old work on something," I said, "and you enjoyed destroying it." She scoffed and reached for the bottle. "Oh my God, Ava, it was a joke." "No," I said. "It was a choice." Howard cleared his throat. "This is getting uncomfortable." "It was uncomfortable for him," I replied, nodding toward Caleb without looking away from Samantha. Diane rushed in, her hands raised as if she could physically lower the tension. "Ava, please," she said. "Sit down. You're overreacting." I didn't move. Samantha poured herself another glass, her movements exaggerated. "You always need a villain," she said. "I'm not responsible for your parenting issues." I felt Caleb shift behind me. I reached back without looking and rested my hand on his shoulder. He froze for half a second, then leaned into it, just enough for me to feel. "He didn't ask to be taught a lesson," I said. "And he didn't ask for you." That got her attention. Samantha straightened. "Excuse me." Diane's voice sharpened. "Ava, that's enough." "No," I said quietly. "Enough was a long time ago." Samantha laughed, but it came out thin. "You think standing there makes you brave?" She said, "You're embarrassing yourself." "I'm protecting my child," I said. "That's not embarrassing." Howard stood halfway, then sat back down. "Let's all calm down," he muttered. Diane stepped closer to me, her eyes pleading now. "You're tearing this family apart," she said. For what a piece of paper I turned to her for the first time. "You wiped the table," I said. "You didn't touch your grandson." Her mouth opened, then closed. I was trying to keep things civil. "At his expense," I said. Samantha slammed her glass down. "He's soft because you made him that way." She snapped. "The world doesn't coddle people." "I do," I said. "That's my job." Caleb's grip tightened on the back of my shirt. Frank shifted again at the head of the table. His jaw worked, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. He didn't speak, but his eyes finally lifted from his plate to me. The room felt different then. Taut, like something had been pulled too far to snap back. Diane shook her head. "You're being dramatic," she said weakly. I met Samantha's stare and didn't blink. "You don't get to hurt my son and call it growth." I said. "You don't get to hide behind jokes." Samantha looked past me, searching for support. No one spoke. I stayed where I was, my body a barrier, my silence no longer submission. Frank stood up slowly. Not in anger, not with drama. He moved the way he always had, deliberate, careful, as if speed might crack something that was already under strain. The room quieted without anyone asking it to. Even Samantha stopped moving. "I should have spoken earlier," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. It always did when he used it this way. Diane turned toward him in relief. "Frank," she said quickly, "thank God. Tell her she's taking this too far." He didn't look at her. I stayed quiet because it was easier. He said, "Because silence kept the peace. Or at least the appearance of it." Samantha laughed once, sharp and dismissive. "Dad, don't start. You know how Ava gets." Frank finally looked at her. There was no warmth in his expression. No anger either. Just focus. "I know exactly how Ava gets," he said. "She gets tired of watching harm get explained away." Diane reached for his arm. "You don't mean that." Frank gently moved her hand aside. "I do." He slipped his wedding ring off his finger. The skin beneath it was pale, indented, like it had been holding on for too long. He placed the ring on the table, next to the ruined painting, where the red stain had dried darker at the edges. Caleb inhaled softly behind me. I felt it more than heard it. Samantha stared. "You're being ridiculous," she said. Over a kid's drawing, Frank didn't answer. He walked toward the corner of the room where his travel bag sat untouched. He unzipped it and pulled out a thick notebook, its cover worn, the spine bent from use. He returned to the table and set it down with a solid thud. "I am a structural engineer," he said. "I spent my life studying failures, stress points, the places where pressure builds until something gives." Howard shifted in his seat. What does this have to do with anything? Frank opened the notebook. Everything. The pages were filled edge to edge with his handwriting, dates, notes, numbers written out carefully, deliberately. "I started tracking patterns," he continued, "not because I wanted to accuse anyone, because I wanted to understand what I was seeing." Diane's face had gone pale. "Frank," she whispered, "please." Samantha crossed her arms. "Is this an audit now?" "You asked me for money," Frank said, turning a page. "Small amounts, then larger ones. You had explanations. Always reasonable, always urgent. I paid most of it back." Samantha snapped. "You paid back nothing," Frank said calmly. "But that isn't the point." He ran a finger down the page. $7,200, $11,450, $19,800. Each one had a story. Diane shook her head. "We didn't need to do this in front of everyone." "We did," Frank said, "because everyone here laughed today. Everyone here watched a child be humiliated and decided it wasn't worth interrupting dinner." He closed the notebook halfway and looked at me. "I let you think you were alone," he said quietly. "That was my failure." Then he looked back at Samantha. And I kept counting. Frank turned the notebook so we could all see it. "This isn't about one withdrawal," he said. "It's about accumulation." Samantha leaned forward, squinting. "You're exaggerating." Frank tapped the page. $7,200, he said. "That was for equipment. You said your platform needed an upgrade." He turned another page. $11,450. Medical bills. No receipts, just urgency. Diane's breath hitched. "Frank, stop." He didn't. $19,800. Brand placement. "You said the return was guaranteed." Howard muttered. "This is uncomfortable." Frank looked at him. "So was today." He flipped again. Slower now. There were more. Smaller ones. Grocery cash. Emergency repairs that never happened. Transfers timed late at night. Always just under the amount that would trigger a call. Samantha's voice sharpened. "You tracked us. I tracked stress." Frank said. "And the total." He placed his finger at the bottom of the page. $268,500. The number sat there. Heavy. No one laughed. Diane shook her head, tears spilling now. "That's not fair. It wasn't like that." Frank closed the notebook and opened it again to a different section. A folded document was taped inside. He smoothed it flat. "The largest transfer," he said, "was 3 years ago, the week after Labor Day." Samantha's color drained. "Dad, you were driving home from a party." Frank continued. "You'd been drinking." Howard straightened. "What are you talking about?" "You hit a parked car," Frank said. "Then you hit a pedestrian." I felt my stomach drop. Caleb pressed closer to my side. "She was walking her dog," Frank said. "You didn't stop." Diane let out a sound that wasn't a word. She covered her mouth. Samantha stood abruptly. "It was an accident." "You fled," Frank said. "That was the choice." Diane grabbed his arm. "Frank, please. We handled it." Frank turned to her. "You handled the fallout." He tapped the document. The case didn't disappear. It was negotiated down. Quietly, expensively. Howard whispered, "Jesus." Frank's voice shook. "Just once. You paid lawyers to reduce charges. You paid a civil settlement so the family wouldn't sue. You paid to keep it out of the news. Samantha's voice rose. You don't know what it was like. I know what it cost, Frank said. Our retirement. Our future. Diane sank into her chair. I was protecting her. You were protecting an image, Frank said, at everyone else's expense. He turned to Samantha. You weren't building a brand. You were being insulated. Samantha laughed. Brittle. So what? You're judging me now. I'm naming reality, Frank said. You aren't successful. You were subsidized. Silence pressed in from every side. Frank closed the notebook with care. And after all of that, he said, you stood here today and mocked a 6-year-old for creating something. Caleb's fingers tightened in my shirt. You taught him that cruelty has no consequences, Frank said, because you were taught the same. Diane sobbed openly now. You're tearing us apart. Frank met her gaze. No, he said. I'm stopping the collapse. He looked at Samantha one last time. Your power was rented, he said, and the lease is over. No one spoke. The ledger lay between us, open and undeniable, and the room finally understood what it had been built on. Frank didn't raise his voice when he said it. I filed an emergency fraud notice this afternoon. Samantha blinked. What? The accounts are flagged, he continued. The cards will decline. The review begins Monday morning. Diane shot to her feet. You can't do that, she said. Those are joint accounts. They were, Frank said, until they were used to conceal harm. Howard stood up halfway. Palms out. Let's slow this down. No, Frank replied. This has been slow for years. Samantha reached for her phone, fingers moving fast. You're bluffing. She opened her banking app. Her face changed before she said anything. She tried again, harder this time, like pressure might fix it. It's not loading, she said. Then, quieter. It says declined. The word landed differently than laughter had earlier. It stripped the room bare. Diane grabbed the back of a chair. Frank, this is insane. I warned you. He said, I told you there were cracks. He turned to me. Ava, I'm sorry you had to hear it like this. I nodded, unable to speak. Frank faced Samantha again. This cabin, he said, was my inheritance. Your mother's name was never on the deed. Diane shook her head violently. That's not true. It is, Frank said. You have 1 hour to pack what you need for tonight. Samantha laughed, shrill and unsteady. You're kicking us out in the rain. The locks will be changed tomorrow, Frank said. The sheriff will handle the rest. Diane pressed a hand to her chest. Where am I supposed to go? Frank didn't answer her. He looked at Samantha. You invested in her. He said, now you can stay with her. Samantha's confidence cracked. She looked around the room, searching for allies. Howard stared at the floor. No one met her eyes. This is abuse, she said weakly. Frank shook his head. This is consequence. She turned to me then, desperation replacing arrogance. Ava, she said, tell him he's lost it. You can't let him do this. Caleb shifted behind me. I felt his breath against my back, steady but shallow. I'm your sister, Samantha added. We grew up together. I looked at her, really looked. The woman who had always stood taller because someone else built the ground beneath her. You should leave before the storm gets worse. I said. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Frank opened the front door. Wind rushed in, cold and sharp, carrying rain with it. Time starts now, he said. Samantha stood frozen for a moment longer, then grabbed her bag. Diane followed, sobbing, still trying to bargain with a system that had finally stopped negotiating. The door closed behind them. The house felt smaller, quieter. Caleb leaned into my side. I wrapped my arm around him and didn't let go. The house stayed quiet after the door shut. Not the awkward quiet that waits to be filled, but the kind that settles in once something permanent has happened. Frank remained by the door for a moment, his hand still on the frame, as if he were making sure it would not open again. Diane's voice drifted back in through the storm one last time. "Frank, please," she called. "We can talk about this." Frank didn't respond. He closed the door and locked it. Samantha knocked once, hard, then again, softer. When she spoke, her voice was unrecognizable. "Ava," she said, "just come here for a second." I didn't move at first. Caleb tightened his grip on my sleeve, his fingers warm and insistent. I felt how badly he wanted this moment to be over. I stepped closer to the door but didn't open it. "You need to go," I said. Her voice cracked. "You're really going to let this happen? I didn't start it." I said, "I'm ending my part in it." "You think you're better than us now," she snapped. The old edge tried to come back, failed, and broke apart. "You're not. You're just lucky." I rested my hand flat against the door, feeling the vibration of the rain through the wood. "Luck doesn't look like this," I said. There was a pause. Then her tone changed completely. "He's my nephew," she said. I didn't mean to hurt him. I thought of Caleb standing at the sink, apologizing for water on the floor. I thought of how quickly he had learned to disappear. "You didn't stop," I said. "That matters." Her breath hitched. "We're family." "So is he," I replied. Another pause, longer this time. "You always take things too seriously," she said weakly. I closed my eyes. "You always needed someone else to pay the cost." The footsteps moved away. The knocking didn't come back. Frank joined us in the living room. He didn't speak. He just nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of a boundary finally held. Caleb looked up at me. "Are we in trouble?" he asked quietly. I crouched in front of him and took his face in my hands. "No," I said. "You're safe." He searched my eyes, then nodded, trusting me. Behind us, the storm pressed on, but inside the house, no one raised their voice again. 6 months later, Caleb spilled glue across the kitchen table. The bottle tipped in his hand, a thin line spreading faster than he expected. He froze. I saw it happen, the old instinct trying to take over. His shoulders lifted, his breath caught, his eyes darted toward me. "I can clean it," he said quickly. "I'm sorry." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. "Hey," I said, setting my mug down. "It's just glue." He waited. The pause mattered. Frank looked over from the corner where he was sanding a wooden frame, his sleeves rolled up, his hands dusty. "Grab a rag," he said calmly. "It wipes up easy if you catch it early." Caleb blinked. "I'm not in trouble." "No," Frank said. "You're learning." Caleb nodded once, grabbed the rag, and wiped the table. When he finished, he smiled. Not the careful one he used to wear. A real one. Our apartment was small. No spare rooms. No heavy silence. The windows faced a park instead of a lake, and the light came in clean and honest. Nothing here needed pretending. Frank stayed close now, but not overbearing. He helped when asked. He listened more than he spoke. At night, he slept better than he had in years. Diane sent letters. Long ones. She blamed stress. She blamed misunderstanding. She blamed me. I didn't read past the first line. I didn't burn them either. I let them sit unopened in a drawer until they lost their weight. Samantha never reached out again. I heard she took a job she used to mock. I heard fewer people returned her calls. Consequences move quietly once they start. Caleb finished his new painting and held it up. "Do you like it?" he asked. "I love it," I said. Frank nodded. "Let's frame it." As they worked, Caleb talked freely about school, about the park, about nothing important and everything that mattered. He didn't watch his words. He didn't apologize for space. I stood there listening, feeling the cost of what we had done, and the relief of what we had saved. If any part of this story felt familiar, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself, you're not alone. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let a broken structure fall so something real can stand. Caleb laughed as a drop of glue landed on his fingers. No one flinched. That was what survived.